3 spine-chilling true road trip horror stories. Unexplained events revealed that haunt travelers. The sun hung low in the evening sky as Mark, a construction worker in his late 30s, lifted the last cooler into their SUV. Laughter erupted from Ellie and Jake, their orange backpacks bouncing as they settled into their seats, eager for the adventure that lay ahead. Off they went, gliding through the cornfields of the Midwest with a mixtape of cheesy road trip songs blasting from the speakers. It felt perfect, until the sinister twist of fate crept in, darkening their bright spirits. As they drove deeper into the heartland, the vast emptiness of the fields began to shift uneasily in the fading light. They pulled into a dilapidated gas station, dust swirling in the air around them. A disheveled attendant eyed them with dubious interest, the corner of his mouth twitching as he leaned in to whisper about the local legend, the Watcher. A shiver ran down Mark's spine, but he brushed it off with a laugh, the chill dampening the joy of their adventure. The family filled their tank and heartily resumed their journey, turning up the radio to drown out the unsettling vibe. Then the static hit, thrumming like a drum in their ears, the cheerful songs warped into ghostly whispers. Ellie's voice broke through the tension. "I saw something," she exclaimed, eyes wide, scanning the rearview mirror. Mark shook his head, laughing nervously as he accelerated, surely just a trick of the light. Shadows tangled around them, fluttering like the corn in the fields beyond, stretching their imaginations like the fading sunshine. The world around them grew darker as they pulled into a rest area, shooting stars flickering above. To their surprise, the parking lot was empty and overgrown, weeds seeming to cling desperately to remnants of forgotten joy. In one corner, an abandoned van sat eerily, doors ajar. Curiosity ignited, Mark led the way toward it, Debbie gripping his arm in a silent plea as dread smothered her heart. Inside, the remnants of past travelers told a haunting tale, clothes strewn across the floor, children's toys eerily forgotten, each item echoing a chilling story of disappearance. "Mommy, it's scary," Jake said, voice trembling, drawing Lisa's gaze away from the remnants. Panic seeped through Mark's veins, and the laughter they had shared transformed into a hard knot of fear deep in his stomach. They stepped back instinctively, glancing around the vacant lot, dread pooling as silence enveloped them. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As they hurried back to the safety of their SUV, tension bubbled beneath the surface. The kids squabbled about window seats, the innocent sound contrasting heartbeats pounding in Mark and Lisa's chests. The darkness closed in like a tightening noose. And then the unmistakable crunch of gravel echoed around them. A figure emerged from the depths of the shadows, masked, intentions shrouded in mystery. Mark's heart raced, dread clawing at his insides, thoughts spinning wildly. In that gut-wrenching moment when fear surged, they realized they weren't alone, not in this forsaken place. The abandoned van flickered with an unsettling light, hinting at secrets best left buried. They huddled closer, hearts pounding as they fought against the overpowering terror that sought to engulf them. What awaited them beyond that masked figure? The sound of their fear echoed into the night, leaving them questioning their choices and their lives hanging by a thread. The masked figure took a cautious step forward, gravel crunching beneath heavy boots. Mark's breath quickened, whispering for it to be a prank, a ridiculous joke played by the universe. Shadows flickered around the man, obscuring his features, but Mark felt the weight of those eyes boring into them, like claws out for blood. "Who are you?" Mark managed to choke out. His voice trembled, the brave facade earlier crumbling to dust. Each breath was laden with the acrid scent of fear. The figure raised a gloved hand, a slow motion that felt surreal, a movement arrested in a moment of pure dread. Ellie shivered against her mother, clutching Jake tightly. They all caught a glimpse of something shiny hanging from the masked man's belt, an object that glinted in the moonlight. A knife? Mark's heart raced as he instinctively stepped back, drawing his family behind him. This wasn't just a person, it was the embodiment of nightmares, swirling around the campfire, stories told to scare kids into behaving. "Get in the car!" Mark shouted, urgency slicing through the panic. He felt Lisa's grip on his arm tighten as they bolted to the SUV, adrenaline sparking panic-fueled energy. Ellie and Jake scrambled into the back, eyes wide and filled with fear, but the masked figure was already closing in on them. Mark yanked the driver's side door open, heart hammering against his chest, and slid into the driver's seat in one fluid motion. Just as he slammed the door shut, he felt a pounding on the window. The masked figure was mere inches away, the chilling outline of his body shifting in the darkness. Mark didn't dare look. It was as though staring directly at him would drag them all into an abyss of despair. "Start it! Start it!" Lisa urged, her voice rising in desperation. The SUV shook under the pressure of their fears, but the engine sputtered in response, unwilling to cooperate. The masked figure grinned, a sliver of satisfaction breaking through the shadows, a glimmer of madness. "Come on!" Mark yelled at the vehicle, each attempt to crank the engine fueling his dread. Each hesitant sputter seemed to echo a cruel taunt. Just as despair gnawed at the edges of his sanity, the engine roared to life. With no time to waste, he slammed the gear into drive, heart racing more wildly than the tires screeching against the gravel as he shot forward. They flew down the dark road, the eerie silence creeping back into the SUV, thick and pungent, almost tangible. As they distanced themselves from the rest area, Ellie's voice broke the stillness. "Is he coming after us?" Mark dared a glance in the rearview mirror, terror tightening his chest. The figure stood there, simply watching, stillness mingling with the shadows like he was a part of the night itself. Nightmarish thoughts consumed Mark, visions of stories he'd heard splintered across his mind, travelers who vanished or were found years later, bodies lifeless and eyes blank. What if he has a car? The thought clipped Lisa's voice as she turned toward Mark, eyes wide with fear. The adrenaline coursing through him dulled their earlier excitement, leaving only a throbbing awareness of reality's precarious edge. "Don't think about that now," Mark murmured, forcing himself to focus on the road. Each bump jostled their peace like a reminder of the lurking dangers. They sped through the dark, miles burning beneath them, uncertainty balancing on the edge of their consciousness. But then, an uneasy feeling slipped into the vehicle. Was it just Mark, or was the air turning colder? Jake whimpered from the back seat, "I don't want to die, Daddy." Mark's heart sank, a weight of anguish crashing down. How did they get themselves caught in this nightmare? They should have turned around. They should have never stopped. Each turn brought no relief, only hunger for the path away from what stalked them. Something rustled in the breeze beyond the cracked window, a whisper, almost unbearable in its darkness. Then, a distant light flickered on the horizon, or was it always there, just hidden in the shadows? As hope crept into Mark's mind, a breath of fresh air, he soon realized something was terribly wrong. That light was moving, shifting, and it was coming toward them too fast. "Mark? What is that?" Lisa's voice trembled with fear, eyes locked on the growing luminescence behind them. The masked figure was no longer alone. Another shadow emerged, then another, and another, all shadowed figures streaming down the road. "Drive faster!" Mark yelled, panic ripping through him. What horror unfolded behind them was beyond anything he could accept. As the entities approached, the once distant light morphed into a blinding glow, threatening to engulf them whole. What awaited them next was the ultimate loss of hope, and it loomed closer with every heartbeat. The SUV rocked violently as Mark pressed down on the gas. The blinding light chased them like a monstrous predator, devouring the distance between them and doom. Heart pounding, he calculated their chances. The woods cocooned the road ahead like a living graveyard, there was nowhere to turn. "Faster, Mark!" Lisa screamed, her voice strained, almost breaking. Ellie squeezed Jake's hand, careful not to let him see her own fear. The kids mustered their courage, but Mark could see it reflected in their eyes, the same terror he felt tightening his throat. The shadows behind them morphed into shapes, stretching and twisting, taunting them with the promise of despair. Suddenly, the headlights caught something lurking beside the roadside, a figure barely hidden by the thicket. Its eyes glowed, twin orbs of hunger that followed their escape. Mark's stomach lurched. Was it another masked figure or something even worse? "I wish we were never on this stupid trip," Ellie whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "They'll get us, won't they?" Jake's innocent plea twisted the knife deeper into Mark's heart. "Shut up. Just hold on." Mark barked, the desperation in his voice echoing off the cold metal of the car. He kept driving, praying for a miracle. Ahead, the trees formed a dark tunnel, branches clawed at their windows like skeletal hands. Just as he thought things couldn't get worse, the suffocating silence shattered by the unmistakable sound of a revving engine. "They have a car!" Lisa shouted, panic spilling over. A black pickup truck emerged from the shadows, lunging forward like a ravenous beast, the engine growling like an animal hungry for flesh. The headlights pulsed and swirled as it gained on them, a specter riding the night. Mark's fingers gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, an animal-esque growl rising in his throat. "Stay back!" He shouted into the accelerating void, not sure who or what he was warning. As the pickup pulled up next to them, Mark could see the driver, a grinning face framed by scraggly hair, wild eyes flashing with madness. He leaned out the window, screaming something unintelligible, something like a curse or a taunt. Out of nowhere, the masked figure reappeared behind them, brandishing that shining knife. Mark's heart dropped. Two predators were now circling them like vultures over a dying animal. "Mark! We have to do something!" Lisa cried, her eyes filling with tears. The world outside turned into a kaleidoscope of horror, leaves whipping in the wind, headlights illuminating faces twisted with words of despair. Mark was living a nightmare, a spiraling descent into the abyss with his family trapped inside. He swerved sharply left, trying to shake the pickup tailing them, though it only pulled closer, relentless and rabid. With every sharp turn, Mark felt their options dwindle. "We need to get out of here. Turn. Go!" Lisa shouted, her voice raw and raspy. Suddenly, he spotted a narrow dirt road diverging from theirs, barely visible beneath the overcast shadows. It could be a way out, or it could lead them into deeper darkness. "Hold on!" Mark shouted, changing gears and powering the SUV into the rough terrain, asphalt falling away beneath them. The wheels kicked up dirt and gravel, and the pace grew chaotic. Grit and fear filled the car, and as the road twisted and turned, the hunt continued. Ellie squealed. "Will we be okay? Daddy, please. Just trust me." Mark strained, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, only to find horror multiplied. The masked figure had merged with the pickup truck, two shadows now fused into one horrifying monster of fury, closing in on their survival. The SUV jolted violently as the tires skated over loose rocks. Just when it seemed they might finally break free, the headlights flared, briefly blinding him. A chilling realization swept over Mark: they were being herded, driven deeper into the valley where escape could slip away like sand through fingers. A dense fog rolled in, thick as dread. "Mark, look out!" The voice rang hollow. Time halted as the world became a black void around them. What would greet them next was worse than death, an abyss where hope was extinguished, and night took hold. Ahead in the gloom, a shadow loomed larger than life, a darkness that felt alive. Whatever followed was no longer just chasing them, it was hunting. And they were the prey. The moment the SUV plunged into the fog, the headlights revealed a dilapidated sign swaying in the wind: "Welcome to Black Hollow." Mark's stomach churned. The name felt heavy, each syllable weighed down by the dread that hung thick in the air. "Not exactly a cheerful welcome," Lisa muttered, her voice barely rising above a whisper. The pickup truck edged closer, its low growl vibrating the ground. Mark could see the driver's crooked smile, wide enough to be terrifying but somehow twisted by the shadows. That smile didn't promise help. It oozed malice. "I can't believe this is happening," Ellie said, clutching Jake tightly. Her voice faltered under the weight of panic. Ahead, the trees bent closer, cloaking the road in sinister darkness. Just then, the masked figure surged forward, knife glinting in the faint light, a flash of silver amid the gloom. It lunged towards them, a terrifying blur. "Get down!" Mark shouted, slamming on the brakes. The SUV skidded, gravel spraying in every direction, stopping just inches from a gnarled tree. The pickup surged past them, tires screeching in defiance, disappearing into the night. Mark risked a glance at the rearview mirror. The masked figure had vanished into the fog. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the only sound their labored breathing mingling with the faint rustle of the night. "Is it over?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling. "For now," Mark replied, heart still racing. But even he knew better. "Keep the doors locked," Lisa said. "I don't trust this place." Mark nodded, his blood pumping hard, the fear not yet lessening. "We should keep moving." With caution, he shifted into drive and pressed the gas lightly. As they rolled down the road, the shadows seemed almost sentient, whispering threats as they passed. The oppressive fog deepened, wrapping around them like a shroud. Then a flash. Mark's heart lurched. There were flickering lights ahead, shapes moving within the haze. They were not alone. "Do you see them?" Jake asked, wide-eyed, pointing at the darkness. "Don't look, just keep your head down," Mark commanded, the authority in his tone barely masking his own fear. They passed by a crumbling gas station, its windows shattered and walls peeling. Shadows moved behind the glass figures, distorted. A chill crawled up Mark's spine. There was something about the shapes that felt eerily familiar. What was that?" Ellie stuttered. "I don't know," Mark said, trying to steady his breath. "Just keep your eyes front." As they pushed deeper into Black Hollow, more flickering figures emerged from the fog, some just standing still, and others moving bizarrely. It was as if they were being watched, the eyes of the town zeroing in on them, marking them as intruders. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from the back of the SUV, causing Mark to jerk the wheel. He shot a look at the rearview mirror. The masked figure darted from one shadow to another, impossibly close. "Go! Get us out of here!" Lisa screamed, her voice shrill and frantic. Punching the accelerator, Mark fought against the rising tide of anxiety. The road snaked forward, merging between thick trees that swallowed the remaining light. Then a bone-chilling howl echoed around them, vibrating through the car. It was a sound beyond animal, a cry of pure malice that coursed through their bones. "Daddy!" Jake whimpered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "We're almost there." Mark shouted back, rammed by desperation. A flicker of hope danced far ahead, a faint glow perhaps signaling freedom. But as they approached, the glow morphed into something unrecognizable, shapes converging at the source of the light. Panic surged. It was no longer about escaping the masked figure, they were barreling towards a gathering of monstrous forms, grotesque and twisted, encroaching on something far worse than they had faced before. This was the heart of the nightmare, and they were heading straight for it. "Mark, stop!" Too late. The SUV surged forward, and the moment felt inevitable. But as the clouds pressed down and darkness enclosed them, Mark felt an icy grip of terror. Settle in. Whatever awaited them beyond the lights was not meant to be seen by human eyes. What lay in the center of that glow? Were they truly escaping, or were they just sprinting toward a new horror? The moment they jolted toward the swarm of twisted shapes, the headlights illuminated grotesque faces mingled with the shadows. Mark gripped the wheel tighter, fighting against the instinct to slam the brakes. Instead, he pressed the accelerator harder, hurtling straight into the mass of figures, every heartbeat echoing in his ears like a funeral drum. "What are they?" Ellie screamed, panic spilling from her voice that he couldn't answer. The shapes were a mixture of human and something otherworldly, contorted limbs, gaunt faces, and mouths that twisted into smiles that were nothing short of demonic. They moved in unison, shifting like a dark current. "Mark! Just go around them," Lisa shouted, her voice sharp against the rising tide of fear that filled the vehicle. But there was no way around. The road narrowed, swallowed by trees that creaked ominously, branches clawing at the sky. Mark swerved slightly, praying the car wouldn't topple over as he tried to stay away from the figures closing in like a curtain. Then they hit. The front of the SUV lurched violently, the crunching sound mingling with horrified gasps from inside. "Did we hit someone?" Jake whispered, eyes wide with terror. "I don't," but the words caught in Mark's throat. There were no screams, no shouts of pain. Just a deep, hollow silence that replaced the noise outside. Mark sped forward, heart racing as flashes of the figures danced in the rearview mirror. They had vanished, swallowed by the fog, and an eerie hush ruled the night. "Are they gone?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling. "Just drive," Lisa urged, the authority in her voice making Mark feel a flicker of control. Yet, as the SUV continued its frenzied escape, the glow of distant lights began to flicker, illuminating another part of the hell they had stumbled into. It wasn't a safe haven, it was something worse, a monument of twisted metal and towering structures that loomed like silent sentinels over a graveyard of forgotten hopes. "Where are we?" Jake whimpered, clutching Ellie tightly, his small body trembling. "Just keep your eyes on the road, Jake," Mark barked, trying to inject courage into his voice, but inside, he felt the terror binding him. Ahead, something moved larger than the figures before. Dark masses emerged, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger, zeroing in on the light of the SUV like moths to a flame. Mark felt a stifling sense of doom wash over him, the realization that they were no longer just fleeing the masked figure, they were deeply entrenched in something ancient and sinister that had claimed this place. "Turn back! Turn back!" Lisa cried, but panic had sunk its claws into him. The world outside flashed like a nightmare, a cacophony of growls and faint whispers swirled around them, threatening to devour the car whole. Then they were enveloped in darkness, the headlights flickered off, and Mark's heart stopped. "What's happening?" Ellie yelled. "I don't know. I can't see." A figure stood inches from the windshield, a horrid mass of rippling flesh, eyes like black pits that seemed to stare straight into their souls. Its breath fogged the glass, surrounding them with a fetid chill that froze the blood in their veins. "Get out!" Mark screamed. But the doors wouldn't budge. The chilling realization settled ever more heavily: the barriers were no longer physical, they were trapped within the very fabric of Black Hollow. "Mark, what do we do?" Lisa's voice cracked, the weight of despair palpable. "Fight back. We can't just sit here." He didn't have a solid plan, just survival instinct kicking in with a primal ferocity. But as they scanned the fog for a way out, the figures surrounded them, closing in, their yearning cries mixing with the howling wind. What were they? Were they alive? Or were they just memories of the lost? The questions pounded through Mark's mind, but there was no answer. Only the deafening terror of being enveloped. Then, piercing through the madness, he caught sight of something amid the shadows, a flicker of hope or another trap. "Over there!" Mark shouted, spotting a faint glimmer. Hugging the edges of the darkness. "We have to go toward that light." But what if that light held an even more horrifying truth? Would they plunge deeper into despair or find an escape? As they barreled toward what lay ahead, uncertainty mingled with dread. It felt as if they were running straight into the maw of an unspeakable horror. What awaited them at the heart of Black Hollow, and would they have the strength to confront it, or would it consume them whole? The light grew larger, pulsating like a heartbeat, drawing them in with an irresistible pull. Mark's foot pressed harder on the gas pedal, seeking any respite from the suffocating chill that surrounded them. In the hushed atmosphere, Ellie's soft whimper sliced through the tension like a knife. "Please. I don't like this," she pleaded. "Neither do I," Mark shot back, his voice trembling. With each passing moment, doubt wormed its way into his mind. What if they had stumbled upon a trap? What if the light was just as deceptive as the shadows that had clawed at them? As they sped closer, the shapes became clearer. What he initially thought was an abandoned building loomed into view, a dilapidated church, its spire reaching toward the sky like a skeletal finger. Broken stained glass glinted ominously, casting kaleidoscopes of colors onto the cracked pavement. "Mark, stop. We need to go back," Lisa cried, her eyes wide with panic, but the SUV continued to careen toward the dim light as if possessed. "Then what? We just keep driving aimlessly into this nightmare?" He hated the desperation in his own voice but couldn't shake it. Just as they were about to drive past the church, the front tires squealed, coming to a sudden halt as if something invisible had pulled them back. They were all thrown forward, hearts pounding. What the Mark started but was cut off by a deafening noise from outside, a low rumble followed by shrieks that echoed through the empty night, ripping apart the stillness like a raging storm. The figures from before swarmed around them again, their ghastly faces illuminated by the flickering light of the church. This time, Mark could see them in deeper detail, etchings of despair carved into their skin, mouths twisted in agony that seemed to welcome them. "Get out! Get out!" Jake shouted, panic amplifying as he frantically pulled at the door handle. But it wouldn't budge. The doors had locked themselves, sealing them within a cage of terror. "Look!" Ellie yelled, pointing towards the church. The flicker transformed into a steady glow, revealing a figure standing at the entrance, tall and shadowy, cloaked in darkness yet radiating an unsettling light. It gestured toward them, beckoning with a long, bony finger. "Should we go?" Mark hesitated, the words crunching under the weight of fear. "No. We can't trust anything here," Lisa screamed, her voice sharp with a tinge of hysteria. But as those words settled in the air, Mark felt the invisible chains of fate pulling him toward the very heart of Black Hollow. Suddenly, the figure's mouth opened wide, a sound erupting that was both a scream and a song, a call to the lost. The cry echoed within the vehicle, shaking the glass, and every soul inside turned cold. Mark's mind raced. What if it was a plea for help? What if they were meant to save these lost souls? But then he remembered the faces surrounding them, contorted, twisted, full of despair. "Mark!" Ellie shouted, her terror palpable. "We have to get out. We have to run." But an unseen force gripped the car tighter. The engine growled ominously, and the lights flickered between the church and the dark figures, revealing only glimpses of their anguished faces. The shadows began to dance, moving closer, fingers outstretched, intertwining with the threads of their hopes and fears. Mark's breath quickened as the realization hit him: they had unknowingly entered the very depths of hell. The church was no sanctuary, nor was the light a sign of salvation. It was a lure, a trick. "No!" he shouted, finally finding the strength to fight. "Not like this." He slammed the gear shift into reverse, but the vehicle shuddered as if it had a mind of its own. The clamor outside grew maddening, drowning out reason. And just like that, the windshield cracked, a web of fractures mirrored the chaos inside Mark's head. With a final push against the immovable barriers, Mark slammed the wheel to the left, aiming directly for the spire. The ghosts shrieked, and the world blurred around them, tension escalating to a deafening peak. Would they gain the strength to escape their prison, or would the specters of Black Hollow claim them forever? There was no turning back now. The onslaught was unstoppable. And as they hurtled forward, all that remained was the chilling uncertainty of what awaited them in the black void of the unknown. The impact was thunderous. Glass shattered, splintering like thousands of tiny stars cascading through the night. Mark felt the jolt shoot through his body, the SUV's frame groaning in protest as it collided with the church's stone facade. But the world outside did not fade. Instead, it intensified. The moment they hit, a deafening silence enveloped them, as if the air had drawn a sharp breath, holding back the screams. Mark blinked, disoriented, lungs gasping for air, heart hammering against his ribs. The light around them flickered again, but this time it seemed to expand, swallowing them whole in blinding brilliance before shrinking back into a dim glow. "Are you guys okay?" he gasped, collecting his thoughts amidst the chaos. I think so," Jake stammered, his face pale, eyes darting around the now eerily quiet vehicle. Ellie was trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We need to get out of here. Now." Her voice was a wavering whisper, laced with sheer panic. Before Mark could respond, the engine sputtered violently, then fell into an unsettling silence, the headlights flickering before dying completely. They were plunged into a murky dark, even more suffocating than before. Faint sobs echoed in the cramped space, the sounds of their fear intertwined with something else, a soft, hissing whisper that snaked through the air like fog. "Did you hear that?" Lisa's eyes were wide, scanning the shadows as if they might sprout limbs and reach for her. "Yeah, but it could just be the wind," Mark suggested, though even he felt the dread creep into his bones. He leaned forward, pressing his ear against the driver's side window. The night was alive. Low murmurs cascaded, unintelligible yet filled with a sense of urgency, as if 1,000 conversations were happening at once, all drowning in hopelessness. Out the window, the figures surrounding them had vanished, but their absence felt heavier than their presence. "Guys, we need to move," Jake urged, already fumbling with his door again. If they come back. The moment Jake pulled the handle, it refused to budge. Something, cold and unyielding, gripped the vehicle from the outside, holding firmly like a clutching hand. "What the hell?" Jake shouted, pushing harder, panic fueling his strength. "We're trapped." Mark shot a glance at the church, its silhouette menacing against the pallid moonlight. "We have to get out, but if we go out there," he couldn't finish the thought. As if in response, a booming rattle shook the SUV, rattling them like marbles in a jar. The church seemed to breathe, slowly exhaling a deep, guttural sound that filled them with a sense of doom, a warning etched in the marrow of their bones, and then, the doors unlocked with a soft click, granting them a moment's reprieve before the darkness clawed back at them. Yet uncertainty churned in the air, suffocating them with indecision. Was the door open for escape, or was it a call to doom? "Let us get out," Ellie yelled, scrambling for the handle. They each reached for the door, fingers trembling, hesitating as their hearts raced in sync. "Wait!" Mark yelled, a sudden intuition gripping him. "What if it's worse out there?" "Are you kidding? We're not safe in here," Jake countered, his voice harsh, the tension thickening the air. Suddenly, the ground beneath them quaked, and the church answered with an anguished roar that shook their insides. The very earth felt alive, and from it, dark tendrils began to slither and weave into the night, reaching for the SUV. It was happening, fear morphing, transforming into something dire and malign. "Run!" Mark screamed, flinging the door wide open, half pulling, half pushing Ellie out into the night. The others followed, hearts racing like wild animals, but even as they stumbled from the SUV, the malevolent church loomed over them, ready to consume the terrified souls that dared to step into its twisted fabric. They sprinted toward the shadows of the trees, every nerve alive with dread. But what waited for them in the dark? And were they truly free, or simply leaping from one horror into another, ahead of them? The forest whispered secrets, beckoning or warning, only time would tell. Every breath felt like a countdown to something monstrous, something inevitable. And then, piercing through the thundering silence, a cry shattered the night, a piercing sound that came from deep within the church. It was not human, yet it carried the echo of every lost spirit they had seen, a blend of despair and longing that promised horror beyond imagination. Was it a guide, a warning, or a siren luring them back into the depths of darkness? The choice lay ahead, even as the shadows behind them clawed hungrily at their heels, unwilling to let go. The trees closed in around them, dark and twisted, squeezing the light from the moon like a firm grip on hope. Mark led the way, pushing through the underbrush with frantic energy, heart pounding like a sledgehammer in his chest. Jake and Ellie stumbled close behind, fear pulling them into a breathless sprint. "Which way?" Jake gasped, glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting to see shadows lunging for them. "I don't know." Mark shouted back, his voice strained. "Just keep going." The ground felt alive beneath their feet, each step crunching gravel and fallen branches, echoing into the night like a heartbeat of the forest. Yet, over the sounds of their flight, a deeper noise began to rise, a low thrum that seemed to pulse through the earth and into their bones. It was as if the church cried out, alive with a grief that was palpable, a reminder of what they had just deliberately escaped. A sudden chill swept through the grove, and Ellie's grip on Mark's arm tightened. The whispers that had haunted them in the car morphed into a cacophony, tumbling through the air like a storm unleashed from the bowels of hell. They were no longer merely sounds, they now took shape, broken syllables intertwining in a language both foreign and dreadfully familiar. "Do you hear that?" Ellie cried out. "It's just the wind." Mark's voice trembled. But deep down, he knew different. The whispers were calling them, urging them to turn back. A primal instinct tugged at their hearts. "Keep moving," he barked, pushing through the brush, each branch clawing at them like desperate hands. The thrum grew deafening. It sang in their ears, mingling with their growing panic. Just ahead, the trees parted slightly, revealing an opening where the grass was thick and darkly inviting. Mark hesitated, a voice nagging at him. The path felt wrong, too inviting in how it beckoned. Yet, the need to escape wrestled with his instincts. "Over there!" Jake yelled, pointing toward a flickering light in the distance, a pale glow illuminating the dark. Hope surged, but it came tangled with apprehension. "What if it's a trap?" Mark questioned, the thought chilling his blood. "Better than being out here," Jake argued, his desperation sharpening. With a reluctant nod, they pivoted toward the light, heartbeats synchronized in absolute dread. As they neared, the light revealed itself to be a makeshift structure, a decrepit cabin, its windows shattered like jagged teeth, and walls cloaked in shadows that seemed to twist and shift. "Is anyone inside?" Ellie whispered, glancing nervously at the door hanging on a single rusted hinge. "Only one way to find out," Jake replied, trepidation tightening his chest. Mark pushed the door open, it creaked in protest. An unnatural humidity swept out from the dark interior, a stifling breath pouring over them. The air smelled of damp wood and rot. Shadows danced in the corners, as if something unseen was waiting to pounce. "What are we doing?" Ellie's voice quaked, fear wrapping around her words like a coil. "This isn't safe?" Mark echoed incredulously. "Are we safe anywhere?" "We'll take our chances inside." As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them with a finality that felt ominous. They were encased in a darkness more complete than the night outside. Then, the whispers returned, swirling in an almost joyous frenzy, mocking their choice, reminding them of the horrors from which they had fled. Suddenly, a violent crash sounded from the back of the cabin. Mark's breath hitched as he felt a cold sweat cling to his skin. "We have to look," Jake urged, eyes wide. "No," Mark protested, but the others were already moving, propelled by a need to know, a compulsion that felt ancient and inescapable. They crept toward the sound, every step pulling them deeper into the belly of the cabin, where shadows stretched and the air thickened with unseen dread. What awaited them in that black abyss? Would it be salvation or the truth of an unspeakable horror ready to devour them whole? Just then, a voice sharp and clear cut through the chaos, a word they could almost recognize. Help! But who was calling for help? And why did they feel as if that plea was meant for them? Mark's heart raced as he moved deeper into the cabin, each footfall a battle between instinct and dread. The whispers surged around them, a crescendo of despair that seemed to echo from all corners. Ellie pressed her back against the wall, breathing in shallow gasps, eyes darting toward the thick shadows that loomed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, voice trembling. Mark nodded, a knot tightening in his stomach. It's coming from the back. Jake, spurred by a mix of fear and curiosity, took the lead. We have to help whoever's in there, he insisted, voice cracking under pressure. They moved cautiously, each step echoing in the silence. The air grew heavier, suffocating, stinking of mildew and something far worse, something rotten that clawed at their senses. Shadows seemed to flicker quick, almost alive. Stop! Mark hissed, gripping Jake's arm. We can't rush in like this. We have no idea what's in there. But what if someone's really hurt? Jake countered, breaking free of Mark's grip and advancing toward a darkened doorway at the far end of the room. Wait, Jake Ellie started, but the words fell away as the sudden crack of splintering wood came from the doorway. The hair on the back of Mark's neck stood on end. A figure loomed, shrouded in darkness, the very air trembling with its presence. Help! The plea emerged again, deeper this time, slithering through the shadows, blending with the whispers. It felt wrong. Get back! Mark shouted, forcing Jake to halt. But curiosity tugged at them like an invisible leash. Ellie's eyes widened, panic flickering between them like static. The air thickened, charged with a sense of foreboding, pulling at their deeper instincts. Please, the voice cried again, but it was different, each word dragged out, almost pleading for their attention while dripping desperation. Is someone really in there? Jake dared, though the hesitation in his voice betrayed his own fear. Not everyone who calls for help is worth saving, Mark muttered, backing away. He watched as the shadows shifted, swirling like smoke, dancing at the edges of reality. Suddenly, the door to the unknown swung open with a loud creak, revealing a narrow passage that vanished into an impenetrable blackness. Their breaths mingled, hanging heavy in the damp air. Let us just get out of here, Ellie urged, voice barely above a whisper. But Jake stood frozen, eyes fixed on the void. Just a peek, he said, lowering himself slightly as if to crawl through the opening. Jake, don't! Mark yelled. But it was too late. Jake was already half inside, drawn by the invisible magnet of the voice. Mark lunged forward, but the shadows twisted around Jake, as if embracing him. A chilling wind swirled, extinguishing their last sliver of light. Help! Jake's voice turned from curiosity to terror, breaking like glass against the cabin's heavy, longing silence. Mark felt panic clawing at his throat as he grabbed hold of Jake's leg, pulling with all his strength. But the shadows held firm, almost alive, wailing around them like a banshee. Help me! Jake cried, eyes wide with horror, recognizing the dark, hungry intent of the thing looming just out of sight. Let go! Mark shouted, wrestling with the invisible force that seemed to draw Jake deeper into the abyss. No! Jake roared, scrambling wildly, but the shadows began to pull him apart. Ellie screamed, tears streaming down her face as the darkness pulsated, almost breathing in their fear. Mark's vision blurred, a storm of emotions battling inside him. Faint flickering lights began to flicker in the corners of his vision, taunting him, and the whispers shifted to laughter, mocking their plight. The last thing Mark saw before darkness enveloped him was Ellie, her eyes wide with horror, as the shadows swirled, hungry for more. And then silence. What awaited them now, lost in the depths? Would they escape the unyielding grasp of the night, or had they crossed into something beyond salvation? Above the chaos, a voice whispered once more, soft and chilling, welcome home. The stillness enveloped them, thick and stifling. Mark's heart raced as he emerged from the watery depths of unconsciousness, visions of haunting figures and grotesque shadows flashing through his mind. He gasped for breath, cold air filling his lungs, awakening the fiery panic that surged through his veins. He was sprawled on the floor of the cabin, Jake's figure beside him, face flat against the wood, unmoving. Jake! Mark croaked, crawling toward him. Desperation clawed at his throat as he gently shook his son's shoulder. Jake, please wake up. He felt Ellie's presence ripple beside him, her voice trembling like the leaves rustling in a storm. Is he okay? Oh God, Please, someone help. Mark turned his attention back to Jake, his hands trembling as he pressed 2 fingers against the boy's neck. A pulse strong yet shaky. Relief flooded him, but the shadows surrounding them behind the cabin were thickening again, stirred by an unseen breeze. They had to move, had to find a way out. Get up. We need to get out of here. Mark urged, his voice ragged, hoarse with fear. He could feel the invisible weight of the darkness pressing closer, eager to consume them once again. Jake groaned, blinking as he regained consciousness. What happened? His voice cracked, dazed and vulnerable. Just get on your feet. Mark commanded, pulling his son up to his feet. Panic pulsed through the air, and the shadows danced closer, beckoning. Ellie, hold on to your brother. Lisa's voice, determined and fierce, broke through the chaos, igniting courage within him. She steadied herself amidst the whirl of terror, inching toward the door. We need to move, now. Mark nodded in agreement, grabbing both kids as they rushed toward the door. The wind howled outside, low and mournful, welcoming them back into the night. Yet as Mark opened the door, they were met with a sight that sent them freezing in their tracks, a sea of figures standing outside, waiting patiently, mouths twisted in silent screams toward the night sky. Why are they just looking? Ellie whispered, and even her soft voice trembled with the weakness of understanding. Each figure seemed trapped in its own misery, together creating a haunting mosaic of lost souls with desperate eyes. None of them moved. They're the lost, Lisa murmured, horror etching lines across her face. Trapped forever. Mark pulled his family closer, taking a step outside. We can't stay here. Summoning every ounce of strength, he steered them through the crowd, moment by moment, expecting the grasping hands to pull them into darkness. Instead, they passed through freely, the figures paying him no mind. They had a singular focus, a longing that stretched into the void of eternity, but then, in the shadowy corner of his eye, he saw the figure, the cloaked entity calling to them from the threshold of the cabin. It had regained clarity against the backdrop of the haunting figures. Its presence loomed like a specter, a grotesque silhouette, beckoning with a bone-white finger. Mark! Run! Lisa screamed, snapping him out of his frozen state. They began sprinting toward the edge of the trees, heart rates sinking in a chaotic symphony of fear. Yet each step pulled them deeper into the thick fog that surrounded Black Hollow, the contours of the world blurring as they raced. The sunlight began to pierce through the fog. Mark felt hope blooming in his chest, his feet pounding against the earth as they drew nearer to escape. We're almost there. He urged, the sunlight intensifying with every breath. Suddenly, the cacophony of growls erupted behind them, shadows shifting and unfurling like smoke. Faster! He shouted, pushing through the thickening air, urging his family onward. It felt as if they were fleeing the depths of hell itself, each breath a burning flame clinging to life. Ellie stumbled, but Jake grabbed her hand, pulling his sister along with an iron-willed determination. They burst through the last line of trees, and the dawn greeted them like an old friend, sprawling fields glistening with the first light of morning. Keep going! Mark shouted. Adrenaline surging through his veins. The desolate road lay ahead, free from darkness, but as they broke free into the sunlight, a whisper echoed behind them, a chilling promise lingering in the air. You can never truly escape. You belong to us. Mark pressed forward, knowing their journey wasn't over yet. They had escaped the grasp of Black Hollow, but the memories and horrors would cling to them, shadows that would never fade. They clambered into the SUV, breathless and wild-eyed. Mark turned the key, the engine sputtering to life like a growing pulse, louder and more vibrant than before. We made it, Mark breathed, relief flooding his system, but a sense of caution still lingered. Are we really safe? Ellie questioned softly, a lingering worry in her eyes. As they pulled away from that place, Mark glanced into the rearview mirror one last time. The shadows hung back, but he could sense the weight of their presence, forever etched into the corner of his mind, an echo that would never truly dissipate. I don't know, he finally said. But we're together. We'll face it, whatever it is. And with that, he pressed the gas pedal harder, breaking free from the terrible grip of uncertainty, vowing to protect his family from the mysteries still haunting the road ahead. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the expanse of the new day, Mark felt a flicker of strength light up his spirit. They were alive, they were free, and together they could face whatever darkness awaited at the turn ahead, and with that, their road stretched before them full of hope, and a lingering sense of the unknown. This is your moment. Don't let it pass without showing your support. Subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories we have in store for you. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep us going. Your support matters more than ever. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the conclusion of this roller coaster ride. And don't wait even one more second to share this with at least 5 friends who need to hear this story. Only true fans understand the importance of keeping this community alive.